Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are in the very early stages of the 2040 to 2041 offseason. Have a lot of work to do with our Pirates this year after a disappointing 79 and 83 season. In our third year as general manager of the Pirates, we're absolutely expecting to have a winning record, and we're absolutely expecting to be in the competition for a playoff spot this year. And clearly, we did not succeed in those goals, and we didn't really succeed in many, if any, of our ownership goals. For what it's worth, we did, however, still get a $4 million bump to our team budget, so it's better than nothing. Budget's going to be $134 million next season after being $130 million this year. So a little bit of progress. We've cut our scouting and development budgets temporarily to open up some money for free agents. And the other thing that we're doing is we're kind of really in earnest beginning the first churn of more expensive players with these Pirates, which unfortunately is something we may have to be doing more frequently going forward. We'll see how things go. We traded away most notably our number 4 starter, Marco Estrada, and Charles Deas, relief pitcher who we picked up last year. Those two guys are going to be making about $9 million between them next year. We got Greg Gaylord in return from Tampa Bay. Think that he is a hopefully decent replacement in the starting rotation, potentially for Estrada. But our real goal is to hopefully have him turn into a very high-impact reliever out of the bullpen for us. But he is going to get a crack at the starting rotation at least early next year, assuming that he's healthy, because we'll probably be starting with our top starting pitching prospect, Longoria, down in AAA for a period of time. So Gaylord will definitely slot into the number 4 or possibly the number 5 role that Estrada was pitching in the starting rotation, and save some money getting rid of Deas. And then we also traded away Jorge Lebron, who we picked up in a trade right before the trade deadline last year. Pretty solid bat in the outfield, which is something that we need, but he was probably going to be making around $7 million through arbitration. Just didn't feel that we could afford to keep him on board. We got a 24-year-old left fielder, Alfredo Velasquez, in return. Made his major league debut with the Phillies this past season, hit .254 with 12 homers and 236 at-bats. Don't love him defensively, doesn't have a ton of speed, but he does look like someone who's going to hit some home runs and somebody who can also potentially get some walks. So could be a somewhat productive player for us going forward. He's not as good as LeBron, but he's also a lot more cost-effective. Looking at the rest of our team, 2 other players we're going to move on from. Danny Mendez, who's poised to make about $6.6 million in arbitration this year, had a respectable season for us as our first baseman this past year, but with a 1.2 WAR, just can't see this team spending over $6 million on him. The issue is that nobody else really wants to spend $6 million on him either. You'll see when we run who we can get in trade for him. It's a lot of mediocre relievers or just mediocre players in general who are signed to unattractive contracts. So what we are going to do is just make him a 0 offer, since we really can't get anything for him in trade. Tony Owens is similar. This will be one that will hurt a little bit simply because he's such a popular player, but he is essentially maybe a slightly better than replacement level reliever, and you can see we can get essentially nothing for him as well. Actually, last year he was the perfect definition of a replacement level reliever based on that 0.0 WAR that he put up. He is a fan favorite, so fans will not be happy that we move on from him, but with the amount of money those 2 players are poised to make, we are going to make sure that we put the offer to Tony Owens down to 0, let him become a free agent, and the same thing with Danny Mendez, let him become a free agent as well. We did decide that we are going to make an offer to catcher Julio Quinones, which we already did. Gonna try to go with Heel and Quinones as our catchers, which we had thought about. Feel like we may be overpaying him a little bit in the low 2 millions, but he's above average defensively. He has a bat, is the nicest I'll say about his batting performance. You can see he's definitely been a below average offensive player over the course of his career. But as a backup catcher, I think we can live with him. I did look at the potential free agents, and they're just a awful crew. Not really anyone who can hit, and not really anyone who can field all that well. And they're looking in some cases for more money than we would have been paying Quinones. So we will make an offer to him. You can see by the hashtags or the pound signs, if I want to belie my age, that we've made offers to a lot of our arbitration eligible players at this point. And then Gaylord, Chris Gomez, and Jordan Owens, none of them want to negotiate with us right now, so we've made offers to them. So we'll may have to go to arbitration hearings to see what happens, but hopefully we'll have all three of them back on our team next year as well. So particularly with the potential departures of the close to $9 million potentially that was going to be spent on Owens and Mendez, that'll get us into a position where our salary commitment is below $60 million, which is certainly going to be a manageable level that we can hit the free agent market a little bit or take on some salaries and trades during the offseason. Don't think we're going to be huge players in free agency because, as I mentioned at the outset, we definitely want to bump those scouting and development budgets back up closer to the levels that they were last season when all is said and done. I think that with the moves we've made, trading away Estrada and Deus and moving on from Owens, may want to add one pitcher. You know, we've got Gaylord now, as I mentioned. We've got Longoria coming up from AAA at some point, supposedly. And then definitely want to add an outfielder with a bat. And we're going to need to add a first baseman as we move on from Mendez. So definitely have holes to fill, with the exception of Longoria. There's not any immediate obvious help in our minor league system. I think we're still kind of 1 to 2 years away from the cavalry arriving in terms of our top minor league prospects. But I definitely want this team to be competitive next year. So we're kind of retooling on the fly. We're getting rid of some higher paid, talented players, but I think with the pitching staff we've put together here, we've got enough talent to certainly remain one of the top pitching staffs in baseball. We had the lowest runs allowed in the National League 2 seasons ago when we made the playoffs. And this past season, we were second in the National League in runs allowed. So if all we end up losing is a number 4 starter and a couple of relievers, I think we should still remain a pretty solid pitching staff. So hopefully if we can add bats, as I mentioned, at first and outfield, that will allow us to hopefully improve the offense along with some of the other acquisitions we've made like Velasquez, and score a few more runs next year and hopefully be more competitive in not just having a winning record, but back in the conversation for the playoffs. And starting to get some of the arbitration eligible guys signed to extensions. Most importantly, Ricky Gotti, who's one of our top pitchers. Really good to have him back at the top of the rotation along with Santana and Bobby Gonzalez. Would love at some point to still get Gotti signed to a long-term contract, but he is looking for a lot of money, so that's going to be really difficult for us to do on top of the pretty expensive extension that we gave Santana about a year ago. But fans pleased that Gotti's back on board. Willie Arenales, bullpen reliever, lefty, back on board. Omar Gaona, another lefty out of the bullpen, back on board. Fans are pleased with that. Second baseman Tony Cook back. We're hoping to have him back in a more utility role than as our starting second baseman. And then Heriberto Rosales, who has traditionally been our number 5 starter, He's going to be in a competition with Gaylord next year to see who the number 4 and 5 starters are. Also got a first base coach signed. So making a little bit of progress here. Taking a look, we got minor bumps from those two signings that the fans were interested in. It looks like just about a point each, but making some progress getting players signed before they have to go to arbitration. And we've been focused on signing a bunch of our minor league free agents. We also got Andy Ochoa signed. You may remember from our last episode that we had been thinking about moving on from him. For a guy who we've used primarily as a reliever, the bump to almost $4.8 million is going to be tough. He is a guy who could potentially start, although that changeup really mostly scares me off from even trying that. But given that we're moving on from Deus, who is making a little more than Ochoa is going to be, and also Owens, who we view as overpaid, and they're both older, felt that we were well within our budget to bring back Ochoa for at least half a season. Fans happy that he's back. He's a popular player. The shortstop, Luis Linares, that we picked up in a trade with Kansas City. He's probably not going to be with us too long. You can see he will be making $4 million next year. Probably a player who's going to get a little expensive for us. Like his glove, and actually don't hate his bat. I think he can probably be a somewhat more productive offensive player than he was in the 49 games that he played with us. But good to have him back on board too as our roster really starts shaping up. You can see we got 1 point bumps in fan interest from both of those contracts also. So we're certainly not moving the needle too much, but at least we are covering ourselves for some of the eventual losses that we'll have this offseason to players that we're not offering arbitration to, as well as to our two free agents, Kager and Espinoza, if they end up being a little more popular also. We could take a little hit there, but we've got the opportunity, as I talked about, that I think by the time we get through arbitration, we are going to have some money to spend in free agency. We've got some big holes to fill, so we're going to need to spend that money, but we're going to have a little more optionality this offseason than we have in the past, simply by starting to get rid of some people that we're going to be making decent money that for a team like the Pirates, I just didn't think were worth the money they're going to be making. And we've now gotten catcher Julio Quinones and reliever Edgar Flores signed, as well as a couple more minor leaguers. Looking for a 1-year contract for a trainer. Don't necessarily love Jorge Balderrama, especially that poor rehab leg injury skill that he has, although he is outstanding at preventing them. Not a guy we want to make a long-term offer to, but as a bridge guy for 1 year with the hope that maybe some rock star trainer will open up next year. In our view, he's kind of the best option that we've got out there. And I think we're kind of done with our arbitration discussions, as award season's going to be beginning tomorrow with the Gold Gloves. We'll check in. I don't think Gaylord wants to talk to us still. Yeah, he doesn't seem very pleased to have been traded here from from Tampa Bay. Danny Mendez, we're not making an offer. Chris Gomez also was angry that he kind of was not a full-time starter last year, so he doesn't want to talk to us. And last but not least, Jordan Owens doesn't want to talk to us because we had him spending all of last year in AAA. So we will go to arbitration hearings with those three players. Hopefully we'll bring them back at our level rather than the players' level. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I think they all have roles on the team. Gomez, in particular, probably will end up as our starting first or third baseman, with the departure of Mendez, who was our starting first baseman last year, and Kager, who was our starting third baseman. I mentioned we want to pick up an infielder in free agency, but quite honestly, it could be any corner infielder as a potential starter. I don't think we're going to find two and be able to afford two that we not only like but can afford. So pretty likely that Gomez will be back as a starter. Owens probably will be up in the majors next year, but he's going to be more of a backup outfielder with a good glove and hopefully a decent bat. And then Gaylord, as we've talked about, should slot right into the starting rotation at the beginning of the year, and then potentially may move on to a pretty critical relief role for us potentially if everything goes according to plan. And we haven't won any awards for the Pirates in the first couple days of award season with the Gold Gloves and the Reliever of the Year, but Silver Slugger looks like we've got an honor there since we got a personalized email on it. I'd have to guess that it's Isaiah Hill, last year's Rookie of the Year / MVP award winner, who also is now a 2-time All-Star and won the Silver Slugger last year. Would think that he's going to be 2 for 2 as far as Silver Slugger awards, but could be surprised. Nope, it is Mr. Hill. So now his 2 Silver Sluggers, 2 All-Stars, an MVP, and a Rookie of the Year in his first 2 years as a member of the Pirates for the former #1 overall pick. So it looks like Isaiah Hill with that Silver Slugger award, the only Pirate to be honored this year. Looking at some other players, top relievers, Arenales and Ochoa, both of whom we just recently extended through arbitration, did get votes, and Arenales, after a 2-0 record with a 2.41 ERA over 89 2/3 innings, actually did get one of the first place votes. Looking at the National League Rookie of the Year, no consideration for any Pirates there. National League Cy Young Award, no Pirates on the list there. Mario Guzman of the Reds, 16-7 with a 2.81 ERA and 310 strikeouts, the unanimous winner. Over in the American League, Rogelio Loera, another unanimous winner, 19-3 with a 2.33 ERA and an absolutely insane 403 strikeouts over 236 innings, and that was down from a year ago for him. He has some of the nastiest stuff I've seen with 3 pitches with 70+ ratings, including an off the chart changeup, leads him to have off the chart stuff overall. But as much as baseball has evolved to being a 3 true outcomes kind of game, as someone who grew up on baseball mostly in the 80s, also remembers the 70s and certainly enjoyed it in the 90s when the Yankees were dominant. Seeing people in this day and age striking out over 400 players in a season, the worst season he's had in the past 5 years is 363 strikeouts. That's a little bit of an overkill for me, but certainly Rogelio Loera, now with 4 Cy Young Awards for the last 5 seasons for Houston, clearly looks like he is well on his way to one of the most incredible pitching careers in history. Checking on the MVPs, in the American League, Mike Augustini, a familiar name from our Kansas City days. You can see Alex Vasquez of the Royals and Jonathan Ojeda, a couple guys that came up through our farm system, still getting MVP votes there. In the NL, I think Isaiah Hill was probably in the mix. He certainly wasn't going to win it this year with a season that wasn't as exceptional as his rookie year when he led the league in WAR, and also playing on a team that went from 94 wins to 79 wins. But it's not going to shock me if he was still in the top 5 with the numbers he put up. Just on the margin, it looks like he was 6th in the voting for MVP, and was the only Pirate, not surprisingly, to get any votes for that award. And we've got our 3 arbitration decisions. We won on Chris Gomez. We won on Greg Gaylord. And we lost on Jordan Owens, surprisingly. We offered him 1.55. He wanted 1.75. A little surprised after he spent the whole year in AAA. He got such a big raise, but hopefully he'll be a little happier if he ends back up on the Major League roster for this upcoming season. And the free agents have officially filed. I can see there's a lot of pitchers. We're looking for a corner outfielder or corner infielder. Our only options among the top players, at least, are Hedbert Perez, who's wrecked physically, 37 years old. Going to be looking for a ton of money. A 42-year-old O'Neill Cruz at first base, also wrecked physically, looking for a ton of money. And then Jesus Buenrostro, also looking for a ton of money. He's a little healthier, a lot younger. Certainly would be the type of bat that could help us, but I doubt that our Pirates are going to be in the mix for him, unfortunately. So as free agency is getting underway, we do theoretically have some money to spend. You can see close to $33 million. The issue, though, is that we've got, if we want to get back to where we were with our scouting and development budgets last year, we've got another $20 million that we need to put in there, which would take us down to about close to $13 million to spend. Also thinking about player development, we're a little bit behind our draft slot amounts. So actually we need to bump that up a little bit right now, and then when we know exactly where we are picking after the draft lottery takes place, may adjust that money a little bit more, but can see we really have only got about $11 million to spend, because in a perfect world we want to get those scouting and development budgets back up to where they were a season ago by the time the budget is frozen. So we're going to take a look, as I've talked about, if we can find a decent reliever. That's kind of a ancillary need for us. A starting corner infielder, and if we can get a starting corner outfielder, that would be great. Honestly, with Hill in right, Carbajal in left, and then the addition that we did talk about of the youngster Alfredo Velasquez to potentially play in left. Don't absolutely need a starter in the corner outfield at this point. Theoretically, we could go with those three, as I talked about, Hill, Velasquez, and Carbajal. And it looks like those are the three that our manager wants to use right now. Certainly very happy with Hill. Very content with Carbajal. If he kind of keeps hitting at close to league average OPS plus and WRC plus with that glove, happy to have him play center field for these Pirates. Velasquez is kind of the wild card. He's inexpensive and he's young. He's still got some growth as far as his contact, home run power, and eye that could take place. You can see he theoretically can be a better player than he looks like he is today. I think I'd be okay if we end up playing him as our starting left fielder, in which case we'll just need to find another person to be a backup along with Andres Mendez, who's going to be our starting DH. And then Owens, who we talked about, who was down in AAA last year, but is likely going to be on the Major League roster. And given the stamina of our pitching staff and the fact that, Gaona is now kind of slotted into that 5 hole, I still think Gaylord may be the guy to ultimately go there when we get closer to the season. But given the pretty strong stamina that we have among our pitchers, you can see it's not quite as pristine as it used to be, because our closer, Elijah Helton, isn't an optimal starter with his stamina, but still not bad when a 40 stamina guy is the lowest stamina that you have in the bullpen. But we've got a lot of options. We've got a lot of people who can go multiple innings out of relief. So our thought is that we're still going to come back and just have 12 pitchers on the major league roster next year, go with 14 position players again, which is why, even with the fact that we will likely be bringing up Owens as a fifth outfielder, still would be okay if we bring another outfielder on board. And then, as I've talked about, definitely want to bring a first or third baseman on board also this offseason. So taking a look at the potential free agents, first baseman, we already talked about O'Neal Cruz, certainly not in the mix for us, and even with the money that Cabral and Mansu Lee are looking for, those guys not really in the mix. Theoretically, a Manilo Pescosolido could be in the mix for us. Wants almost $9 million. Like the speed. The bat is okay. I don't love that he doesn't have a lot of pop as a first baseman. But he's 6'4", so he can definitely play the position. He's been above average as an offensive player, but he has spent a big chunk of his career in Colorado. Definitely put up better than average numbers when he was in his 20s in Colorado, as opposed to what he's done over the past few years. So I think about him, but I don't see us paying $9 million a year for him. Christopher Torin, another guy with a little pop in his bat, but he's wrecked physically. He's 35 years old. Has been a pretty decent offensive player for the last couple years. Not the most range, only 5'10", so certainly not your prototypical first baseman. We'll have to do some digging. Doesn't feel like there's any obvious additions at first base when we look at guys who can play third. Probably not surprisingly that our buddy Tony Fonseca, who we traded away before having to exercise that, or choose not to exercise that team option, that the Orioles also decided not to exercise that $10.5 million team option on him, but $8.5 million, despite the fact he would probably be a Gold Glove winning third baseman. Not the kind of guy that we're going to be going at. I feel like we've got to find someone who can bring on a little bit of offense. Jim Kager, our former third baseman, looking for $6.5 million. I can't lie, it doesn't look like there's incredible options out here. You know, Danny Mendez, who we let go at first base, is looking for less. He was talking, I think, $7-ish million when we were talking contract with him. So he's being a little more maybe it was $6 to $7 million, but he's being a little more realistic at $4.2 million now. I guess in a worst case scenario, we bring him back to be a bit above a replacement level first baseman for us. But again, for $4+ million, that's not optimal. We may have to see what's available in the trade market, see if we can piece something together. Taking a look at the outfielders that are available, clearly we talked about Perez and Buenrostro, both looking for huge money. Honestly, just looking for who's not looking for a ton of money. And Tony Aleman, who was a free agent last year, also is out there. Just don't see him as being that exciting. I think I'd rather go with the youngster Velasquez as our left fielder rather than him. Chris Jackson, a guy who was on our team till we traded him away near the trade deadline, also out there. But Kai Shek-Chiang is actually a guy who I believe we signed in Kansas City when he came over from Taiwan and then quickly traded away, I think, right to Boston. Maybe he's spent his whole career there. Has a little bit of a bat, but again, looking for more money than we can afford. So doesn't seem like there are any obvious options for us among the outfielders either on the free agent market. Pitchers, a ton of interesting pitchers out there, as you can see. Jesus Bibbs, if we could really sign him for 1.9 million, this is a guy we know back from our Kansas City days. He is fragile, but a pretty effective left-handed reliever. Let's see what he's been doing the last couple years. We just had him that 1 year in Kansas City, but hasn't been quite as effective over the last couple years as he used to be. Profiles as a league average-ish pitcher, but you see he did have an excellent season for us in Kansas City when we used him more as a reliever. He does have the 23 starts, but I believe that was largely as an opener with what our manager was doing back then. I don't think he's a guy who's really effective when he's pitching 160, 180, 220 innings a year, going out there every fifth day and needing to get through the order, 3+ times. But when you don't have to be seeing him more than once or twice, I think he can still be a pretty effective left-handed pitcher. So he's somebody to think about because he's still pretty tough against lefties. And the money that he's looking for is not all that crazy in my view. Similarly, Hugo Macias, another guy not looking for a ton of money, like the team personality, like that he throws close to triple digits. He's an Iron Man. Over the course of his career, he's profiled as a average-ish pitcher. But for a back-end arm in our bullpen, in addition to the captain personality, the high leadership, and I know some of you shudder every time I say this, but the extreme popularity, I wouldn't hate bringing Macias on board for potentially a season in the back end of our bullpen. And our old buddy Dan Keogh from the Kansas City Royals, who is at least was a very home run prone pitcher, is a free agent this year, only looking for 1.7 million. He's an Iron Man, but he still gives up a massive home runs, 15 last year and 58 and 2/3 innings. This was a guy who I believe was a second-round choice of the Royals back in the day. In his control or his movement on his pitches just never really developed as we kind of hoped. You can see he's given up 136 home runs in 518 innings pitched at the major league level. So unfortunate that he's not a big-time major league pitcher, but also unlikely we'll be looking to add him to the roster for next season. And I do feel like with the trading away of Deus, as well as moving on from Owens in our bullpen, we could use a veteran like Hugo Macias, who our scout thinks is still a pretty effective pitcher. OSA ratings, not quite as effusive. Great personality for the clubhouse, throws really hard, Iron Man, so you have a feeling he's going to be out there healthy. Tack on the extreme popularity. Unless he's looking for a long-term deal at 1.8 million a year, I think he's someone we'll throw a little money at. Yeah, 1-year deal, 1.8 million. Looking for a no-trade clause. We'll see if we can get him for a little less at 1.6. Ooh, don't know that I'm going to promise him being a closer, but hopefully, including the no-trade clause, we'll at least have him a little bit interested. He's willing to hear, at least think about what we're offering him. So if we bring him on board, that's probably about it as far as the pitching staff. The issue is I'm not really loving any of the corner infield or outfield players that are out there, so going to peruse the trade block a little bit and then also perhaps just search for some players that meet the criteria we're looking for and just see how exorbitant the demands for the players who aren't on the trade block might be. Among first basemen on the trade block, one kind of interesting prospect, Adrian Oliva. I mentioned not too long ago that I'd prefer to have a first baseman with a little power, but he's such a good hitter. Led the American League with a 330 batting average last year. He's durable, fan favorite, pretty respectable defensively for a first baseman also. Making a lot of money, and I'd want Tampa Bay to keep a lot of it. I'm guessing their request for him is going to be pretty high, but at least want to take a look at it. Actually, it's not horrible. Huh. They just want him off the team. There's definitely some no prospects that they'd be willing to take for him. The issue for us is that we're also going to want Tampa Bay to keep a chunk of his salary, and I think that that's going to become a sticking point. They'll probably take a couple of these guys who aren't big prospects and let us get to maybe keeping 20% of his salary, but then other than that, there may not be anything to talk about. But he's at least someone to think about. Third base, Greg Calderon just doesn't hit enough. Israel Rios, he's acceptable defensively, has a little bit of pop. Making $28 million, and he's not a $28 million player, although you can see a couple years ago he did lead the league with 51 home runs. NL Division Series MVP a year ago. His production, kind of looks better than his batting profile. Over the course of his career, he's been a well above average offensive player, although it looks like he may be starting to trend down here. Going to be 30 years old on New Year's Day. I think with the money he's making, I don't think they should be looking for a ton for him, but they are. They really would only want Hill or Longoria for him, so that's a no-go, even though he would be certainly an interesting prospect. But I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit intrigued by Adrian Oliva, even though he's not the prototypical first baseman I want. You look at that batting average with those kind of home runs, and kind of reminds me of, a Keith Hernandez or maybe a Will Clark back in the day, without the glove that I think either of those players had, particularly Hernandez. But he's got an acceptable glove for first base. If we can get the Rays to keep a good chunk of his contract, I could see him being our first baseman next year. He's been in the majors for parts of 10 seasons at this point. And in a worst case scenario, he's been kind of a league average-ish offensive player. Most years he's been somewhat above average. Two-time batting champion who's out there every day. I don't love that he doesn't walk much. He's a guy who hits 330 and his on-base percentage isn't even 380, so that's not optimal. But beggars can't be choosers for the Pirates, and it looks like they just want to get him off of their books. Again, they'll take just about anything for him. I don't want to be spending $11 million on him next year, and the only way we could afford to do that is if we do end up cutting back our scouting and development budgets, which I don't want to do. But if we can package a few of these players together and get the Rays to keep a decent chunk of his contract, maybe we've got something here. And I'm a little surprised. We can get them to retain 75% of his contract. And honestly, the players we're giving up aren't really generally even prospects. It's really just like the high quality type of personalities that we've been kind of building our minor league system with. So it's going to hit us a little bit. Look at Juan Trevino. Starting pitcher, 25 years old. He's only an A ball. Got incredible stuff. He's honestly one of the more prospecty players, even though at 25, I don't think he's a big time prospect. Jordan Bowden, 22-year-old. He's young. I don't see him being a major leaguer. But then the others, Mario Patino, 27-year-old with a good work ethic, who was in high A ball for us the last few years. Jaden Chaney is 31 years old, high work ethic player. Nice outfield range. He's got some speed. He's a great bunter, but he's not a major league hitter. And then Mario Padilla, who's a brilliant personality, high loyalty, adaptability, work ethic, intelligence, has the respect of his teammates, going to be 31 years old soon. He was an effective pitcher for us in Double-A last year, but he's not a future major leaguer for us unless we have 7 or 8 injuries at the major league level. So to be able to give up that crew and get 1 year of Oliva, none of these guys are in our long-term plans. And like I mentioned, even the players with good leadership, good work ethic, we've got a lot of those kind of guys across our minor league system now. So I think we're just going to make this trade. We're only going to end up spending, less than $3 million next year on Oliva. And he's going to plug right in as our starting first baseman, hopefully be out in the lineup 150 plus games next year like he has been for each of the last 3 years with Tampa. Go out and hopefully hit over 300 for us. Play some pretty respectable defense as a first baseman, and not break the bank. I think that's the move. We're just going to go ahead and complete the trade and not mess around. And not surprisingly, Adrian Oliva is moving right into the lineups that our manager, Jan Vasquez, wants potentially to use next year. Obviously, a lot can change between now and then, but theoretically is going to be batting third against righties and fifth against lefties. I don't know if I love everything that Vasquez is doing right now. He wants to be starting Oscar Gomez at third base. And Oscar Gomez is clearly a brilliant glove. He's just not a major league hitter. My preference would probably be to have Gomez on the bench, Oscar Gomez on the bench, and replace him at third with Chris Gomez, who's not nearly as good defensively, but has more of a legitimate major league bat. It actually looks like they moved him away from first base to third base when we brought Oliva on board, which is fine. That makes sense. I just want to see if we put Gomez back, list him as a third baseman, whether that changes what Vasquez wants to do with him. And it actually doesn't. He keeps moving Chris Gomez back to left field. So I don't know if I'm going to go with that. Maybe that's just a sign that we need to sign another corner infielder to potentially play third for us, especially if Chris Gomez is moving to the outfield. You can see that is potentially taking time away from Alfredo Velasquez, who's now out of the lineup against righties, even though he is theoretically hitting cleanup against lefties. Would like to get the youngster that we picked up in the trade for LeBron some playing time. So I will clearly be, potentially overriding decisions that the manager makes that I don't like. But instead of pursuing another corner or a corner outfielder to kind of join this crew, one option would be to look more for a corner infielder who can play third base as the offseason continues. And the other option that we do have in our system is we signed Alex Gaines, or I guess we didn't sign him. We picked him up in a trade with Cleveland, and he was on a minor league contract with a major league option last year. He played in AAA for us all year. hit just 259, did have 16 homers. He's not ideal defensively at third base, probably more of a first baseman, to be quite honest. I don't know that I love both of my corner infielders potentially not having much home run power, but Gaines is at least a guy who will draw some walks. My kind of concern with him is that at the major league level, he's been, maybe a slightly above average-ish offensive player. Just doesn't have a lot of power, though. 268 hitter with 11 home runs over 162 at-bats, even though he does rake some doubles. He's kind of a fallback if we're not able to find a better third baseman this offseason. Not the optimal solution, and he still obviously has the option to opt out of our organization entirely if we don't put him on the major league roster. Jose Bernal is another guy we've had up off and on in 2038 and 2039, spent all of last year in AAA, also hit 259 down there. He is only a first baseman, not all that exciting offensively. Would really prefer if when we get to the end of March and the start of the season that those guys really aren't in the mix at the major league level, but they're kind of our fallback options at this point if the offseason is not as fruitful as we hope it might be. And I'm really not intrigued with what we'd have to pay for any of the kind of third basemen that are just broadly on teams' rosters. Definitely looking for exorbitant amount for players who are maybe a little bit above average. So I think that is a position we may look to improve as the offseason moves on. But right now, I'm really happy that we've got a first baseman who can hit with Adrian Oliva on board. Kind of interested in finding out what's going to happen with Macias as a potential bullpen arm for us. And as we get closer to the winter meetings and the Rule 5 draft, got to spend a little time thinking about our ticket prices. We started last year at $14.50. And then we moved down to $14 when we had a lot of empty seats. We've made a little progress on fan interest this offseason with the guys we've signed to those deals to avoid arbitration. And you can see, this I hadn't noticed before. I'm sure some of you had seen this. We're no longer last in budget and payroll anymore. We're second to last at this point. I think I'm inclined to kind of keep the season ticket price a little bit low. I'd like to have at least, 10,000 fans in the stadium guaranteed for all 81 games. And then if things go well, we'll try to be a little more aggressive in terms of the ticket prices, but we're not a winning team yet. The market is small. The fan loyalty is pathetic. I know some of you want me to just ratchet up at the ticket price to like a silly level, even if there's only like 400 people showing for the games, if it gives me the most revenue. But I like to play things, I don't know if it's more realistically, but I like to play the game. I like to play the way I like to play the game. It is what it is. So I think I'm still going to be pretty conservative as far as the season ticket prices for next year, and then feel that I can potentially bump the ticket price up a bit with the one time I allow myself each season if it turns out that we've got great attendance numbers. And we have gotten Hugo Messiah signed. Fans are excited about it. 1 year deal. Even he thinks it might be his last contract at age 34. And the fans apparently are thrilled by that. It actually gave us a 5-point bump to fan interest just signing this random reliever. He must be a pretty popular guy. So with that, I will rethink what I was just talking about and going to at least go back to the same season ticket price we had last year. As I said, we will lose some fan interest as some of the arbitration eligible players that we didn't make offers to, and some of our free agents are signed by others' teams. But I think we can probably be close to 10,000 season tickets with that level of fan interest, even with a $14.50 ticket price. Obviously, I want to generate as much revenue as possible. I get that that's kind of the point. But I want to do it in a very responsible fashion. So between bringing on Oliva and signing Macias, I feel like we really don't need to do anything else to our pitching staff at this point, even though it's only December 1st. Kind of feel like I like the guys we have, and we do have some help coming from AAA. So I think we're kind of good there. Still feel like we need another corner infielder or corner outfielder, depending on where we end up wanting to play Gomez and how much starting time we want to give to Velasquez. But we've got money to spend. We've got assets to trade. As I said, we want to put another 20-ish million back into scouting and development, which really means at this point we've only got $6.5 million to spend. But that's enough to bring on another free agent or to take on some salary if we can find a player in the free agent market or the Rule 5 draft or via a trade that kind of fills the hole on our team. So I think this offseason is off to a decent start. Love to hear your thoughts down below as to whether you agree with that or not. And we'll finish off the offseason in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.